Hi, this is Brendan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and I'm here with Adam Balderstone for another episode of Bedrock and Balderstone. And today we're talking about episodes 4 and 5 of Farscape Season 1. We've been watching Farscape, kind of like we did about a year ago with Babylon 5. We're now having Adam take me on a tour through Farscape, and we're just getting into Season 1, and the first episode that we saw was an episode called Throne for a Loss, and the second episode is Back and Back and Back to the Future. And so we'll be talking about those, starting with Throne for a Loss. Adam, why don't you give us just a really quick synopsis of this episode?
Okay, quick synopsis for this episode. Rigel kind of sets this one off. He's trying to negotiate for more food for the group, and he really builds himself up as being this great emperor, which leads this alien race they're negotiating with the Tavlex, deciding they're just going to abduct him and hold him for ransom. But of course, there's nobody that wants to pay ransom on Rigel. And at the same time, in order to make himself look cool, he wanted a nice jewel for his scepter, which he stole from basically the brain of their ship. So the ship is starting to decay in orbit towards the planet. And so basically everyone, even though in other circumstances they may not, we never know, would they have rescued him otherwise, or would they have just let it go? But they are forced to rescue him. And it kicks off from there. So there's also another plot line involving a captured soldier and Zahn that's going on as kind of a subplot.
Yeah, this episode was about average for me in terms of my response to it. It wasn't a bad episode. It wasn't like a great episode, but I enjoyed it. I had fun watching it.
Yeah.
And I thought there was some good character stuff going on, even a little development, because we were learning more about Dargo's blood system, and how,
yes, that's right.
The little details like that I found interesting. The glove was both a little kooky but interesting as well. I like that it added. It's sort of like I could see all. It was one of these episodes you watch it and you could see they're adding this to increase the tension, and they're adding this to do this. But it was still enjoyable, even though you could clearly see them laying these pieces down. Everything from like the ship orbit decaying to the glove adding this internal conflict between the characters. Because otherwise it would have just been an episode of Rigel in prison, basically.
And which, they did the best they could with those. Actually, having the weird alien Jotheb of the consortium of Trow next to him made that more interesting. But still, you can only go with so many sitting in a cell scenes.
And then and there was also the whole thing with like the glove has this stimulant in it. What are they called? The Tavlex? The Tavlex are basically addicted to it. They've just given in.
Not tabloids, Tavlex, yes.
Oh, sorry, Tavlex.
No, you said it right. I was just referring to the fact that Crichton keeps getting it wrong.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he got a lot of names wrong. Even in the second episode, he called the Scorvians the Scorpions, I think.
Yeah.
But I like the twist that there's sort of this race that they encountered something highly addictive that obviously would have like crushing effects on people, and they utilized it for military purposes, and it became part of their culture. And so I found that kind of intriguing, because it was clear they were treating it the way, like if this were like a fantasy world, the way certain places might treat sword play or something. Do you know what I mean? Like it was like that. Like there's this. There's also this reference for the I forget what it was called. Was it the Gauntlet, or did it even have a name?
I think they. Now you mentioned, I can't remember. A Gauntlet sounds right to me, but I couldn't swear Gauntlet works for me. We'll call it the Gauntlet.
I got weird vibes from this episode, though. I got like alienation vibes in the scenes between Zahn and the guy that was sort of getting off of the effects of the drug from the Gauntlet. And I don't know if it's because maybe that actor was he reminded me of like one of the alienation characters. I don't know if it was because the actor played in the series or the movie, or if it just was the makeup. But I just
this has one of the same. This show has one of the same creators as Alienation.
Oh, does it?
Mention it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I used to watch that show with my mom, and I just kept thinking this. I don't know why I keep thinking Alienation in these scenes. But I was also getting like, and I don't mean this in a bad way, even though it sounds bad, but I was getting like a Battlefield Earth vibe from a lot of the scenes that were occurring on the planet. And I don't know why for that either, but I just kept thinking of Battlefield Earth.
The aliens in this one are very comic book. I kind of like it. They are kind of ridiculous, but there's just something I find really amusing about the aliens in this episode.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do feel comic book. Now that you're saying, I can see that.
This whole concept of the gauntlet and everything too is just it's all. They've got this superpower with a super weakness and stuff, and
go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
But I actually think the strongest storylines in this one for me were the ones involving Rigel, and I forget the name of the creature, but the other emperor that was imprisoned that saved him, but then tried to absorb him into he was head of some conglomerate or something. I can't remember.
The Consortium of Trow.
Yeah, the Consortium of Trow. Thank you. It was a good name. And again, back to our Doctor Who thing. That is a good name. Consortium of Trow. That sounds good. Way better than all the crap names we were getting. Doctor Who.
I've been thinking the same thing watching these episodes. The previous episodes too of Farscape. Since you brought that up with the last season of Doctor Who, I'm like, Farscape has really good names compared to that season.
And I don't want to. We won't derail into a tangent on Doctor Who names, but
no.
But I did quite like the name when I heard it. But I like that whole dynamic between those two characters, and just like seeing Rigel so low was kind of interesting. And I also, oddly enough, I liked the subplot with Zahn. It was sort of heavy-handed, but it wasn't like it was a real drug, so it wasn't like they were saying gauntlets are bad. Do you know what I mean? It was.
It's interesting. I mean, it's interesting because it's good character building for Zahn. It's like you get to see Zahn. It's a failure of Zahn. It's like her spiritual side. She's trying to do this big spiritual thing and she fails. I feel like it's more about Zahn than it is about the drug to an extent. About her having this situation where she thinks she can fix this thing with her love and benevolence, and no, he's just going to go back and get his gauntlet back.
But at the same time, like I have to wonder if it was a failure because, I mean, it's not like he was a drug addict in a planet where he wasn't supposed to be doing that. That was like exactly. The culture. So like he goes back. What is he going to do? What are they going to say to him when he says, "No, I'm done with the gauntlet"? Like what's going to happen? I know. I mean, it looks like they might kill you for that. I mean, I don't know enough about their culture, but I wouldn't surprise me if that leader just broke his neck for not wearing the gauntlet anymore. So
yeah. I mean, when I say a failure, it's a failure in her eyes. Definitely, she seems to feel that way.
But I'm really liking Zahn increasingly as the series goes on. He's becoming one of the more important characters really in the show. I mean, everybody's important because there's not that many, but she feels like a real pillar of the overall shape of the group, if that makes some sense.
Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
And so I don't know. I thought it was like I said, it did. I would still place it at average because I want to be very. One thing I learned from Babylon 5 is I really have to give myself the spectrum of ranges, because if I come in and say this was great, and then the real great episode comes, and I already have a sense of the quality range of this series. So this I felt was like an average episode. It had some good things, and I think that the thing that kind of made it average was it had two really great parts, and the rest was sort of like we were saying. It was entertaining, but it was clearly just there to make the episode work and keep it suspenseful enough. And I feel like if I had watched this episode when it aired, I would have been fine. I would have been like, this is a good episode. But in hindsight, you can sort of see that stuff better just when something's had time to age. Do you know what I mean? And so
yeah. I mean, I think too, this is another episode where I think I'm enjoying it more on the rewatch than I did the first time, because one thing I'm really noticing with the show is that the characters are all expressed really well from the beginning. Sometimes you watch sometimes like you watch the first few episodes of an old sitcom and none of the characters feel like the characters yeah, and you're like, oh, that's weird. But with this show, I feel like everyone is that character because I already have this real attachment to all the characters. It's making even an average episode like this even better for me, I think.
I don't know why, but the classic example of what you just said to me is like Dan Fielding from
Yes.
where he starts out as like a conservative, sort of kind of cruel guy, and then like over the course of the series, he becomes more of a sex maniac, and that becomes his defining character. They keep the conservative stuff, but I'm sorry.
He just becomes a total sleazebag over the course of the show.
I mean, I don't know where they're going with this show, but that is interesting to me. I do think those science fiction series do tend to do that better than sitcoms. Like Babylon 5, I don't know, I guess some of the characters did kind of evolve, but...
Monica feels a little off in the early episodes, I think. Maybe just like the first few, I'd say, before she really hits her stride. But on the whole, they did a pretty good job there, definitely. I mean, because that's a show, too, where they had a very good idea of where certain characters are going. So, like, Londo and Jakar, for example, are really strongly defined because there's an arc there they're building towards. And, I mean, to an extent, this show has some interesting character arcs, too. So,
But you're talking about different things. Character arc isn't the same as characterization.
No, but when you're planning on having a character arc, you want to build A so that you can make the shift B.
But I guess what I'm saying is what you're saying though is that the personalities are fully formed. Like it's not like there may be a character arc on top of that, but a lot of shows they start out and the character's like not fully thought out in terms of the personality traits, and then like either they figure it out. Or the character does something random and people love it, and so they just start pushing that personality button over and over and over again, which was probably what happened with Dan Fielding. But I think I don't know. I mean, I like the characters so far, so I think I think they're all. I'm never like, oh man, it's like a Dargo scene, or oh man, it's a Sun scene, or oh man, it's a Zahn scene. Again, the only one who's even slightly boring to me is Crichton, and a lot of it is because he does cringe-worthy things that are deliberately meant to be cringe-worthy. So it's and I think part of that is you're supposed to kind of feel his embarrassment and be in his shoes, maybe. So it's sort of like, oh, maybe I would be behaving like that if I were, because he sort of does these dramatic things that don't really work out. Like you could tell he was thinking about it in advance when he walks into the room, and then when he gets there, it just kind of doesn't pan out the way he imagined it.
It's. I mean, and on the character thing too. I mean, I think one thing this and Babylon 5 both have in common is that a lot of the drama in the episodes comes from conflict between the main characters. Like, not I think the case of Farscape, they're rarely, not sometimes they are, but they're rarely out and out fighting with each other. But there's a lot of tension between the characters. So having those characters developed is crucial to both shows, I think. It's not, it's like in Star Trek The Next Generation, for example, the characters were all pretty bland at the beginning, and they didn't need to be because they were always facing enemy of the week, and that was the main dish being served, was dealing with the enemy. So
we'll have to, at some point we'll have to do. I think if we ever do Star Trek, we should start with classic Trek and go through, because I think that would be I think that would be a more interesting discussion starting point for Star Trek.
Well, I mean that would also open up. Then you could talk about what makes the other ones different. But I think that would be the way to do it.
And also, there are fewer original series episodes, so it would be a easier beginning for.
Doing all of original Star Trek is an attainable goal, definitely.
All of the Next Generation gets harder the more you work through it.
There's a lot of it too. I mean, I watched that show when I was in high school, but I'm always amazed because after I left high school, I kind of stopped watching it. 'Cause, I was in college and I wasn't watching TV much. But Yeah, I'm always amazed at how long that show was on the air.
Yeah, it like
just
10 years or something? It was a while.
something like that. Yeah, I think about 10 years, and I was like, I really only watched the first three seasons at the time. So whatever else I've caught over the years in a random rerun.
Yeah, it's funny too because now our favorite network airs it, BBC America for some reason.
BBC America, our favorite British show. Yes.
But not only that, but they air it in like the most crappy possible way. So it's like like a lot of networks have figured out how to take a show that was done for like a square TV and make it work on a widescreen TV, which everybody has now. And they haven't figured out how to do that, so it looks all crappy, and the sound
Yeah.
quality's bad.
I know. Just have bars on the side. It's like I remember on Christmas Eve, my nephews were watching TV and the Simpsons Christmas special came on. I'm like, oh wow, it's that original Simpsons Christmas special from 1989. I sat down to watch it for 2 minutes, and they did the same thing. It was like the top of the screen was missing and the bottom of the screen was missing, so it would fit the widescreen. And like you're always seeing like part of someone's head, or this is cut off or that's cut off, and I was just like, after 2 minutes, I'm like, no, this it's not like the early Simpsons is beautiful animation,
Yeah.
but they've still utterly ruined the composition of this show. I can't watch this.
Well, if I recall, and I don't know, because every time Netflix puts something up again, it's sometimes different. But like 8 years ago or something, I think Next Generation was on Netflix, and I remember the quality being way better on Netflix than on BBC America. So that's where I would
Yeah.
recommend people check it out if it's still there, which it might not be. But I guess getting into the next episode. 'Cause
Yeah,
we
let's
recapped
get back
this
to
one.
Farscape.
So the next one is what is it? Back and Back and Back to the Future. So it's clearly a Back to the Future reference, and with good reason, I suppose. Why don't you give the breakdown?
Synopsis.
I mean, it's a hard one to cover, but just the general.
Yeah, just the general setup. Yeah, these they encounter. One thing I'll just bring up before I get a synopsis. I like the way both these episodes start almost with the action basically going. It's like the previous episode starts with they're meeting these guys. They like a slower show would have had them hear about the aliens.
Yeah.
They would have arranged the meeting.
Yeah.
It's like, no, the meeting's just about to happen. Boom, you're thrown in. This episode, they're watching this ship that's just disintegrating. And
I have to say, yeah, the pacing of this show is interesting because it feels like it was a little bit ahead of its time, but then we actually slowed down a little bit after this show. So it's like,
Yeah.
you normally when I go back to a show, I feel like I see something that was like we were half baked. Like that's like I can see the clear evolution of how now shows are even more breakneck, paced and things like that. But this actually feels like jarring in a good way. It's sort of like when they first started doing all kinds of stylistic stuff with movies. It's surprising because it breaks what your expectations are. I still find that my expectations at the start of the episodes here are a little bit thrown off for that reason. But I very quickly grab on to what's going on. And I do want to mention one thing I liked about the previous episode was that twist where they go to the meeting and the guys basically rob them. I thought that was a very unexpected sort of thing.
Well, it's funny because Crichton is spending the whole time going, "Don't take your gun, no." It's like going this long argument. It's like, she was totally right to have her gun. It's like the cliche thing would be for Crichton to be right in that situation.
But I'm sorry, your breakdown of this episode.
Yeah, my breakdown is this ship has at first they're all. This ship's disintegrating in a weird, creepy way, and no one wants to get close. Well, not no one. Zahn does, but Rigel and Dargo are a lot more skeptical about getting close. But then Dargo sees that they're these aliens he knows, the Illinax, and he's like, no, we must rescue them, bring them on board. And so they do. They pick up these two. Aliens that are doing some strange experiments, and Crichton gets zapped by something that we don't know what it is at this point. It starts having flashes to the future, and which is it's a It's a concept that's been done before. I mean, I remember Star Trek Next Generation did it, to go back to that, but I feel like it's done really well in this episode.
Yeah.
But
well, I think so. A few things about this one that I quite liked. I thought this was a really good episode. I really enjoyed this episode a lot. It felt like it did, and it felt very Star Trek to me, and not just because of the similarity of that plot, but just the way the threat presented itself, with him being zapped and like you know something's gonna go on with him, and what was her name? What was the woman's name? Matala.
Matala.
With Matala not being all that she seemed, but clearly there was something sinister afoot with her.
Yeah.
It was that kind of an episode, but it was very well crafted, very well structured, and I like that initially these things look like flashes of insight, but it turns out he might actually just be leaping through time itself. He might actually be experiencing these things.
Yeah.
And so that it was almost kind of, what was that movie? Not the movie. There's a book too. I think it was The Time Traveler's Wife. Was that what it was called? Or
Time Traveler's Wife. Yes.
Something like that.
No. The Time Traveler's Wife. I think you're right.
I know there was a Doctor Who episode that had a play on the name, and I might be remembering that more than the original title. But I think you're right.
But
it felt like that kind of time travel, like that kind of like you're time traveling in your own body type thing, and it's like almost biomechanical.
Yeah, I mean, Slaughterhouse-5 is the other obvious reference. They even kind of reference it with that's where his phrase, being unstuck in time, that comes from Slaughterhouse-5 by Kurt Vonnegut. So
that's like the only Kurt Vonnegut book I've read, I think.
Okay.
Slaughterhouse-5.
Well, that's a good one to pick.
That's the one about the Dresden bombing, right?
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah, I remember that more than the time travel stuff, actually.
That's really the heart of it.
But yeah, no, I thought that style of time travel worked in the episode, and what I liked about it was that I liked the switch up where you think it's flashes, then you start wondering, oh, is he really going forward in time? And I like the way they have him trying to fix it, and it felt like they said, shows do this, and this is like a common time travel plot device, but just the way that they handled the presentation of it really worked. It was you were giving you just enough information to keep things mysterious enough. Do you know what I mean? Like you still were like, well, okay, I get that she's bad, but how is she? Like you were still on the edge of your seat, curious to find out what was going on. And also, they were introducing a lot of important world building stuff as they were doing it. You were learning about this alliance between Dargo's people and what was the
Illanax?
The
Illanax.
The Illanax and the Luxons. And but then they throw in the enemy because she's like a spy, and so then you learn of this. Was it the Scorvians? Is what they were called?
The Scorvians, yeah.
And also, this episode had this really interesting, sexy quality to it that I thought was
unsettling sexiness to it, which is great.
It wasn't like a sexiness that you could relax into. It was like, oh my god, the hero's in peril. But you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's parts that, well, that's something I like. The classic thing a cliche science fiction show would do with this is have the first flash forward be the ship's gonna blow up. It's like, boom, the destruction of the ship, which is, he actually have one where that happens. But it's like, that would have been their lead-in. The whole episode would be, how are you going to avoid this? But with Farscape, the first leap forward is into this really unsettlingly weird and creepy sex scene.
Yeah, and it's weird too because it's like leathery. There's like a leather attire thing going on that I don't think you see when she's first introduced, and so it makes it a little bit surreal because you're like, well, that could just be his fantasy. Do you know what I mean? Because I don't remember her dressing that way. It looks, something about the way it's shot really throws you off, and then they just did a good job with the humor of it because he's like embarrassed by these like it's the one thing you probably would want to keep to yourself if you were in that situation.
It's a great reason for saying, well, why isn't he telling anyone about this? And then you have the scene where he does talk to Dargo about it. It's the most awkward and hilarious scene. And Dargo's like, you stay away from her.
No, and I liked that. I really liked the jealous rivalry. And because again, and they explain why later in the episode where Dargo's basically like, it's been so long. Like you forget this guy was in a prison, and
Yeah,
you know,
8 years.
yeah. So it's a very understandable emotional overreaction that he might have. And I don't know much about Luxons. Maybe they're all built that way. Maybe they get very possessive. But it was kind of a funny, humorous rivalry, and again, the thing that is, even though Crichton sometimes annoys me, I did like that he was constantly making the wrong move throughout the episode, but he was doing it in sort of this self-assured, dramatic way, but it was just kind of falling apart. It just all went wrong in various ways, and you could sort of tell. His big thing is it seems like people kind of think he's an idiot or useless. Do you know what I mean? And he's trying to prove himself, but then something about his nature, he's almost got like an Arnold Rimmer quality to him. I don't know if you've watched Red Dwarf at all, but there's
I haven't.
Okay, so there's a character named Arnold Judas Rimmer, and that the name pretty much tells you everything you need to know about the character. But he's kind of a coward who has delusions of grandeur of being this great pilot named Ace. Like he always wants people to call him Ace, but he's just a sniveling, sort of cowardly guy who, you know, will backstab his friends to sleep with a hot chick. Dude, he's that kind of a character. And I'm not saying that Crichton is that, but there's hints of that when he does things like hide behind the bins when Matala attacks. Do you know what I mean? There are these moments where you sort of understand why they see him as cowardly. Or ineffectual. They seem to see him as ineffectual. Yeah.
More than cowardly. Yeah. Yeah, I love the classic line in this one where I think Aaron asks, what's the matter with him? And Zon's like, he is Crichton.
Yeah.
That's just... I was like, yeah, that sums it up. But
so it's I thought that everything in the episode worked pretty well. I also liked the stuff about the war that Dargo just learns about in the context of all that's going on. So the way that Dargo has to learn about that and the way that we're learning about it, it gives it an emotional weight because you can tell Dargo's surprised. And so then we learn more about Dargo too. We learn that his crime is maybe more significant than we were led to believe. And
we learn that he is not telling the truth about it. Because I mean it's you kind of get it in two stages, because when he's talking to Varel and he's saying, well, I got this crime, and the guy's like, well, is it treason? And he says no. And of course, the crime he was talking about in the first episode, when he tells Zahn, he says that he killed his commanding officer, that's pretty treasonous.
Yeah.
that's somewhat treasonous to kill your commanding officer. But so then we find out explicitly later, he says that, we find out that it is something different, although we don't know the details.
Though we do know he considers it a personal matter or something. So that shifted my attention to his household. Do you know what I mean? That made me say, oh, did he murder his family or something, or kill like a brother, or like was it like a more intimate type of thing than a battlefield situation? So yeah, I like that development. I also like that it's still kind of intriguing me now, because I'm like, oh, well, what could it possibly be that it's worse than killing your commanding officer, but also could be characterized as a personal thing? Those are the only two things I have to hang anything on. So,
it's a nice development there. And but getting back to Crichton now, one of my favorite things in this episode is the mask that he keeps dropping and breaking, and the classic thing a typical show would do is during the final timeline where they finally survive, he would put the mask back and it would be okay. Yeah. But no, not in this show. He sets it on the ground and he just crushes it before he goes.
No, and that works, because to me that was like visually him taking control of the situation. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
It was a very effective method. Also, I really liked that conversation he and Zahn were having. And I liked the way that I mean the editing of this episode was very slick, I thought, because they did an incredible job. It could have come out really disjointed and confusing and weird, and it was confusing when it needed to be, but they were able to give you the future and then have it leap back to a moment, and it didn't fall apart. It worked, and you understood how it was working, and then when he finds out that what did they say, time dislocation or whatever, that I thought, number one, I loved the weaponry. I loved the idea of them using this black hole, and I liked that was the cause of this. That was kind of it was cool when it was sort of explained. What was his name? Varel, was that the guy's name?
Varel.
Yeah, when Varel kind of explained it. I also felt that they made very efficient use of exposition in this episode. It wasn't necessarily like, sometimes people get too deep into the show don't tell. It wasn't quite that. It was more they just managed their time very well with it, and they kept it engaging and interesting. And I think with the conversation with Crichton and Varel too, I like it when they that they remember that Crichton is a scientist. As soon as he brings up a quantum singularity, Crichton's just like, a black hole. It's like he's not like, what? Can you explain that? Which is also really great because that was a good way to sort of explain it to the audience, because not everybody, especially at that time, I don't think a lot of people would have just leapt from quantum singularity to
black hole.
Yeah.
No,
exactly. And so I think that was, but they didn't sit there and go, oh, a black hole? You mean like a collapsed star that like he just said black hole. That's all you needed to know. And it didn't dumb it down too much, but it also was totally it was totally aligned, or not aligned. It made sense that a scientist character would say that. Do you know what I mean? Like, it felt because like you said, they were kind of nodding to the fact that he's a scientist and reminding you he has a scientific background. And so that one line, because that was my thought when that happened. I was like, oh yeah, he's a scientist. He can communicate with this guy.
They can talk. But it's I mean, I think what's good about this episode too, the editing is kind of crazy, but it actually makes it more interesting, because once again, the more traditional way shows like this work is you go through the entire story once, then you go through it a second time, then a third time. Whereas this, because it jumps around a little more randomly, it minimizes the amount of time you have to, go through the same portion of the story again. It cuts to the chase a lot by doing that.
Well, and they're different enough each time too. I felt in this one, they weren't like because there are some shows where that gets really tedious, where you gotta like literally sit through the same material again and again, and it's very slow. This was all done very. I didn't have that problem at all. It wasn't an issue, and I think I don't know. It was this was a really good episode. I enjoyed the whole thing. I didn't have any complaints.
No, this is just a classic Farscape episode. I'd say this is probably the first truly classic Farscape episode.
Okay,
so.
All right. Okay, so that definitely raises the bar a bit. So this I'm curious to learn more about the Scorvians, because the one thing I noticed was when she sort of revealed herself, her voice changed very dramatically.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, she does I mean, she goes from one weird voice to another.
It was like, well, before she was using almost like a porn star voice. Like, it was sort of like this, like, she really stuck out. Like, it was like, this woman is not, something is going on here. And it was like, it was like, I feel like they did a really good job of making you afraid of her character from the beginning, but doing it in a way that sort of just like put you off guard a little bit. Like, you weren't, you were like a little bit more focused on the wrong things. Do you know what I mean? And so I think that it worked. I think that aspect of the show worked. I also was kind of puzzled. Why is this like sexy temptress like having this completely academic relationship with what's his name, Varel?
Varel,
yeah. And so I that when for some reason I don't know why, but when Dargo spoke to Verrill, and Verrill was like, "Oh, if you want to if you want to be with her, that's fine." That's when I really started to get suspicious of her. I don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
because I was like, "Oh, you mean she's not tempting everybody? Then there's clearly something wrong here." Like there, you know.
I like the fact she was so unsettling too, because it adds to the fact that we talked about that scene already with Crichton and Dargo, where Crichton's talking to him and Dargo's like, it thinks he has some crush on her, and it's just like, and Crichton's like, no, she's really not my type, but it's like, yeah, it's like she's completely there's just something about her character that's really off-putting, so it makes it more funny than if the character really were like seductive in an appealing TV kind of way that was drawing the audience in. The fact that most people watching the show are like, well, there's something wrong with her.
On. Yeah, it's very she's like half crazy or something. There's something weird going on with her, and you can tell with Crichton, like, he's disturbed by these intrusions. Do you know what I mean? He's like it's bothering him. And Dargo is the one who's, again, though, I thought that made sense, because the way I was looking at it was, well, if Luxans and Ilonix have this long-standing alliance, then they must be a little more compatible than, like, you know what I mean? Like, they've learned about each other. They so he knows how compatible they are as a species and all that stuff. So whereas with Crichton, I think he even said, like, can I even do anything with her? Like, he doesn't know. And it's also kind of interesting because it kind of gets at the Star Trek thing where Kirk is, like, famous for like sleeping with all these different and I guess Riker later on. But that on the one hand, Star Trek kind of hand waves all of the problems that entails, and this episode sort of highlights a lot of the problems that entails, if that makes sense.
Crichton just doesn't know what's going on at all. But this is we have the scene with Aaron and Matala too, where they fight, where we get to see a little bit of Aaron's personality there with where they're not just sparring physically, but going at each other too.
I was reminded, and again, that reminded, what is it? Is it Nimbo Jitsu? Is that the one from Star Trek?
Oh, yeah, I can't remember the name of it, but I know what you're talking about.
I'm going to look it up while we're talking, because I do want to get that one right. But I don't think it was Nimbo Jitsu. It was
no, it's not. It's
Yimbo Jitsu?
No, I couldn't be sure, but I know it's not Nimbo Jitsu. But
let me see.
But yeah, that was her little scorpion strike attack.
Well, that whole I don't know how Ambo Jitsu. I'm sorry, I got it way wrong. Ambo Jitsu, the ultimate martial art. Which that scene is always just struck. That's like always. That scene encapsulates, to me, like, how shows and movies get martial arts completely wrong. Do you know what I mean? It's just like a complete misunderstanding of all the things that go into a martial art. And so I was thinking about that during this scene. Number one, I think it's a martial arts scene of its time. It's a martial arts scene where particularly with the Matala character, she's doing these, like, really odd hand movements that were extraordinarily impractical. And then she finishes off some with the dim mock type thing with the, like, a scorpion sting almost, which I thought looked pretty cool. I thought that was one of the better moves that they invented for the scene.
Yeah.
I thought that the Sun stuff was good though, because she seemed a little more practical in her approach. It felt like she was just kind of a basic punch
you in the face.
Yeah.
Yeah, which fits her character. She's not going to be doing anything too crazy.
And interestingly, she was the one winning the fight the whole time up until that dim mock move. So
it
was. I thought that I thought that it was those scenes I always enjoy in these shows, because on the one hand, like, I'm sort of critiquing them, like, from a martial arts point of view, but I'm also very interested in, like, the date, like. I feel like when you watch movies and shows and you look at the fight choreography, especially like American shows where it's like it's not like we have a standard fight choreography that sustains over 50 years or something like that. It's always very prone to whatever's in the air at the time. And, there's a difference between a show that's choreographed in the 70s versus the 80s versus the 90s versus the aughts versus today, and this to me felt very 90s.
Well, we are still in the 90s technically at this point in the show. We're still in 1999, I believe. So
what year was The Matrix? Was The Matrix 99? Because I feel like that's when a lot of stuff shifted.
Yeah, I think that was 99 actually. Yeah.
I feel like you get like a Matrix shift, and then you get like the UFC shift. I don't know what we're in today because I don't really watch movies as much as I used to, or at least not recent releases. But I feel like this felt sort of still rooted in that period where anything that looked vaguely stylized like that was assumed to be effective and good, and so there's this dance-like quality to it.
But no, I wanted to get your opinion on that as the expert on that. I thought we can't have an episode without a fight scene like that without talking about it.
What I did like about the scene was the mat. The mat looked very realistic to me. It looked like a real fighting mat.
The mat is actually the Peacekeeper symbol, by the way, which you may not have picked up on.
I didn't, but just the stuff, like I imagined it was like a thin foam mat that you might see at, like some jiu-jitsu places would use it. When I did Taekwondo, we had like a foam sort of interlocking mat that we used. It was like a square, and so I think that it just looked like like I could feel the texture of it when I was watching them. Do you know what I mean? I could, that had like the believability factor to me. I did enjoy the scene too because there was this sense of peril surrounding it, since you knew that Matala was more than she was supposed to be, and you were a little bit disturbed that Crichton just didn't even seem to even worry about the risk of her being, alone with him.
I know. I kind of thought the same thing. It's like, oh, good, you're gonna keep her busy, Aaron. And it's like, aren't you even concerned that I get you're happy that Matala's gonna be busy, but aren't you concerned that something's gonna happen to Aaron here? And something does happen, non-lethal, fortunately, but still.
But you could have at least given Aaron like a wink or something to indicate, the danger. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, it's kind of funny the way he talks. He talks in a way that would totally tip Matala off to be suspicious, but not in a way that would tip Aaron off to be wary.
And she definitely seemed tipped off because she touched his hand. Didn't she, like, go over and...
Well, I think that's the whole reason. She doesn't have any reason to take Aaron out other than the fact she's like, I think she's suspicious, like, I've got to get back. I'm just going to knock Aaron out, and I can go back and get involved in things again. So I feel like he kind of prompted her to use that move on Aaron, because otherwise, why would she have bothered? That was really her only reason.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. So I don't know, any other thoughts on this episode? Is it, or the two episodes together?
2 episodes together? No, I think I've pretty much covered everything I had to say. It's I think we're getting into the meat of the show now, and we're gonna I think we're getting more and more into the point where it's truly becoming Farscape as of this episode.
I guess one thing I'm noticing, maybe this doesn't remain as a pattern as it goes on, but it feels like Rigel is the character that they can sort of shift to the background fairly easily and not have to worry about as much. They can have scenes where he's just kind of chomping on food and grumbling and talking.
Yeah, that's true.
But and so I sort of noticed that, and it kind of works. It's like he kind of gives the ship some atmosphere, if that makes sense.
Well, I think from both a story perspective and from it's like a story writing perspective and from a practical and universe perspective, Rigel is, within the world, he's not someone who's going to want to get involved in a lot of action because he's just this little amphibious dude who's 2 feet tall and can't walk that well. So it makes sense for him not to get involved in a lot of action. And from a writer's perspective, every scene they don't have to pull the puppetry in is a little bit easier on them. So it kind of makes sense on both angles.
Yeah, no, I think that stuff was I don't know. I just again, I only mention it because I've been saying that like I don't get bored when any of the characters have their spotlight time, and so it's interesting to me that Rigel seems to be the one that they're almost comfortable not giving spotlight time sometimes too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I think because he is the most ambivalent character in a lot of ways. He seems to be the one most likely to take moral shortcuts and stuff, and so it's almost good to have him in the background because you don't get too familiar with him too quickly. So it's it makes it harder to say which way he's going to go.
Yeah,
so.
No, that's true. And there is that scene at the beginning when he said, "I'll help you now, you help me later."
Yeah,
and he hasn't really. He has. I don't think he's called them on that yet, has he? Has he asked for the reciprocations?
I don't think so. But yeah, it's yeah. He does work well in the background, definitely.
So anyways, I think we will we'll leave it here and we'll resume next week. And this Friday we're going to be doing Soul of the Sword on Wuxia Weekend. This is an incredibly dark wuxia movie. I cannot emphasize that enough. I've seen a lot of wuxia movies, and this one surprised me with its darkness. It is not dark in the way that it's highly atmospheric. It's not like dark like the camera work makes it dark. It's dark just because of what happens, and so you kind of have to. I think you have to watch a bit of classic Shaw Brothers wuxia to appreciate the level of darkness that this movie has. Because it might, if you're used to like Walking Dead and sort of more sleek, modern, dark character drama, it might not seem quite as dark, but it definitely is. And so we'll be back, and we'll be back on Sunday with our 11th Son discussion, and I know we got other stuff in the works as well, but yeah, so we will let you go, and we will talk to you later.